The tombs of Solemnace. Twilight finished slipping her armor on, flexing her hand as her psychic power flowed through the circuits of her armor. Celestia had taught her a technique to use her magic to put her armor on hands-free, but there was something satisfying to doing everything by hand. At the very least, it kept her mind off of whatever it was the Eldar were on about. She was about to reach for her sword when she heard a knock on her door. Turning away from the weapon for a moment, she crossed and swung the door open. "Oh, hello Sister Bianca." "Good morning, Terra," Bianca said, giving Twilight a smile before moving a nervous-looking Angelique forward. "I was hoping that you might be able to help me with Angelique for a moment." "Well, I was going to meet the sisters for sparring," Twilight started. "But I'm always here to help. Please, come in." Bianca nodded in thanks before ushering Angelique in, the psyker mumbling something as she stepped past Twilight. "Warp travel has always been a bit difficult for Angelique," Bianca said, sitting Angelique down before turning her focus to Twilight. "You are more stable than she is, so you probably do not notice it, but her bouts of prophesying and wandering increase dramatically when we are in transit." Twilight frowned, stepping up to Angelique and kneeling to be on eye level with the girl. "The children of the dragon stare down the mare, and the son of the drake finds only loss," Angelique muttered, shying away as Twilight rested a hand on her cheek. "I spoke with Mashes about this back when she got the visions of the Tyranids," Twilight said, allowing a small bit of her magic to channel forward. "He wasn't willing to let me try then, but I have an idea of how best to help Angelique." "How so?" Bianca asked. "There's a school of magic the Empress taught me about memory spells," Twilight started, shifting so she could look the sister in the eye. "The basic premise is that memory is at least partially connected to the soul, with certain experiences and emotions so ingrained that even the most dedicated or twisted of opponents cannot shatter it completely." "How does it help clear away Angelique's madness?" "It's just a theory right now, but my theory is that if I can supplement what coherent thoughts she has with my own thoughts and memories of the two of us, or even my experiences with the others, then it might be what she needs to rebuild her psyche and stop prophesying all the time." "Claws dig deep into the light, and the mare is burdened by elements," Angelique said, shifting as if she were looking for a means to run around Twilight and back out the door. "I can understand why Mashes was hesitant to allow you to do this before," Bianca said, frowning. "No offense, Terra, but this seems rather dangerous. What is the risk that Angelique's psyche might collapse further, or if some other malediction befalls you during the process?" "I've done this before, I know it will work," Twilight countered. There was a lengthy pause before Bianca spoke again. You have?" "Yes. A variation, at least." Twilight looked away for a moment, feeling a chill run down her spine. "A few years ago, before the Empress started her mission and I met you all, a daemon arrived and attacked my hometown. It twisted my friends' minds, making them behave as their own antithesis. Honesty was replaced by falsehood, generous people became greedy, that sort of thing. Even I started to lose hope, drawing inward and willing to run away from everything." A pause as Angelique gave a small whimper, Twilight reaching out and giving the psyker's arm a stroke. "But the Empress showed me a better path," she continued. "She reminded me of all her teachings, of my own moments of strength when I overcame similar woes. She found what remained of my hope and understanding and stirred it within me again, and I broke through the daemon's manipulations and used that experience to free my friends as well." Twilight gave Bianca a smile. "I know Angelique's troubles come from exposure to the warp at a young age, but if there is some fragment of who she was before then, if we can build off the good that she has experienced since then, maybe we might be able to clear her mind." Bianca gave Twilight an uneasy glance, clenching her hands together as she looked between her and Angelique. Finally she gave a small sigh, scooting back to give Twilight some more room. "Just, don't do too much all at once, and please be careful," she said. "I have worked with many patients, and Angelique is special." "I know." Twilight turned back to Angelique, returning her hand to the psyker's cheek. "Angelique. The mare speaks, and the spark listens," Angelique said, her eyes flicking back to Twilight. "I just want you to focus on my magic right now," Twilight said, releasing a small amount of her power to collect around her hands. Just feel it interacting with your own power. Don't reach out too far, just let it flow through you. Angelique gave an uncertain squeak, tensing up her shoulders as Twilight flexed her hand. The mare, Angelique whispered. The mare only wishes to help, can she? I'm going to try, Twilight said, giving Angelique a smile. Just relax. Try to think of your time with Bianca, the good times. No fighting, no terrors, just peace. The tides lash against the spark, Angelique said, but Twilight could see her shoulders relaxing. Can I stop hearing the tides? That's what we're going to try. Twilight closed her eyes, delving down into her soul to draw up some memories of her own. A few moments of their dinners with Mashes and the others would be a good enough start, Twilight relaxing as he allowed a little more of her magic to brush against Angelique's psyche. Touching Angelique's soul in such a manner was like touching a wall. Twilight's soul could only go so far before running into a solid mass of pain, doubt, confusion. She furrowed her brow, shifting her thoughts to filter through the pain, the cries of the warp and of Angelique's memories, searching for a sign of some pleasant memory, some moment of light within the psycher's soul that could be used to break through the barrier. All she could find were flecks. Angelique, Twilight said, still keeping her hand on the other psycher's head. Is there anything you can remember from your childhood, maybe? Anything at all? Waves crash over the spark, but the light can burn through, Angelique said, shifting her head to one side. There was, Mother would not let me play in the fountain. A fountain? Twilight asked, still not opening her eyes. She could see an image drifting at the edge of the barrier, that of a little girl standing before a worn structure. The orphanage where Angelique lived before her powers developed had a small fountain used for church ceremonies, according to her records, Bianca said from behind Twilight. She mentions it sometimes. Angelique, think of the fountain, Twilight said. What was it about the fountain? Why did you want to play in it? It was, Angelique gave a childish giggle. It was so. I never saw so much water. I did not know what it was, how it flowed like the tides that tear at me. I wanted to touch it, as I had seen the others. Tara, is it working? Angelique has never been this coherent for this long. Bianca said. Yes, I think it is. Twilight allowed a little more of her magic to reach out towards Angelique. Focus, Angelique. Let everything else fall away and just think of the fountain. Before the tides came in, before you became what you are now. I wanted to be like the others, Angelique smiled. I wanted, her smile vanished, and she squirmed to get away from Twilight. The tides close in and the sons of the dragon draw closer. The darkness has a fell name, and destroys the legacy of the light. Something's wrong, Twilight's eyes snapped open as she reached up to take Angelique's head in both hands. The warp's acting up and drawing her back in. Angelique, can you hear me? The wall had turned to a storm, tendrils of energy lashing against Twilight's mind as she tried to bring Angelique back to stability. All she got besides the psycher's whimpering was more visions. She sees a red-skinned giant, face twisted in rage as he launches a bolt of lightning towards her. She sees a woman in gold armor, calmly sweeping a massive greatsword over her head. She sees herself, weeping as the barrel of a bolt rises slowly towards her head. And all she can hear is screaming. Twilight was thrown back, Bianca catching her as the floor beneath them lurched. Angelique screamed again, curling into a ball on the bed as the ship pitched again. That wasn't me. Something broke my concentration. It's a warp storm. Bianca cried, steadying Twilight as another tremor shook the vessel. The Geller fields should hold the worst of the tides at bay, but Angelique will still be exposed. We need to calm her back down before things get worse. The ship pitched forward, Bianca staggering to the bed as she pulled a syringe from a pocket on her robe. A quick depressant should knock her out long enough for us to get her back. No. Twilight grabbed the syringe from Bianca's hand, using the next buck to put herself between the hospitaler and the psycher. I know that's how things are done around here, but using medication to knock out a rampant magic user is the last thing you want to do while her mind is so exposed. Tara, I have treated countless psychers since before you were born, Bianca snapped. Cutting off a psyker's exposure to the warp prevents further mental damage and can stifle any chance of a daemon or worse taking hold of the psyker's soul. But severing a connection so abruptly can break parts of the soul and limit the effectiveness of a caster's magic in the long run. Twilight shot back, pausing before pushing the syringe back into Bianca's hand. Just let me calm her down first, then you can give her the shot. I'll only need a minute. Bianca hesitated, bracing herself as the ship lurched back and forth while Angelique continued to scream. Finally, she gave a nod. Calm her, then I will put her to sleep. Twilight nodded, turning back to Angelique and taking the young psyker's shoulders. Angelique thrashed, but her strength was little against Twilight's armor, even with the Sanguinium martyrs battered by the warp storm as it was. Twilight grimaced as she reached out with her magic, trying to break through the mess of pain and fear Angelique hurled against her soul. Perhaps now, she needed to let herself be vulnerable to lull Angelique's mind. Twilight took a breath, pressing against Angelique's soul as she dug through her memories for a moment of fear replaced by calm. Ryn's word and Caesarea flew by, Twilight reaching further and further back to find something she could use to calm the young psyker. Memories of the Imperium soon gave way to Equestria, and for a brief instant Twilight could feel Angelique relaxing as the changing images flashed through her own mind. She drifted past the Crystal Empire, past the Changeling attack, past Discord's return. Those memories that rested between them, those that spoke of peace and friendship, of the good times she spent before the darkness, those she held on to, mirroring them to Angelique's mind so that her fear might abate. In some that she sent to the young psyker, she even risked placing Angelique within. See, Angelique? You don't need to be afraid. There is peace, calm, just come back to us, come back now. The mare, Angelique whispered, finally ceasing her struggles. She set me down in a calm field. Hush, Twilight, sleep, for the storm won't last much longer. Twilight opened her eyes just as Bianca jabbed the sedative into Angelique's neck, the psyker giving a small gasp as she slumped over into unconsciousness. As if on cue, the ship itself stopped bucking, Twilight and Bianca slouching as they tried to catch their breath. That was rougher than normal, Bianca said, wiping some sweat from her brow. But thanks to you. I think Angelique will be resting easy for some time now. I certainly hope so, Twilight replied, gently lowering the sleeping psyker down onto her bed. When I get back to Equestria, I definitely need to speak to Luna about more mental magic training. Terra, Bianca started. Some of the things Angelique said, is Twilight another name she has for you? Twilight hesitated, looking up to the Hospitaller as she tried to think of the right words to say, whatever would not implicate her as a pony in Bianca's eyes. She did not need another person to look down on her because of her origins. It was, she started. It was a nickname I had, back on my home world. My friends, they all called me Twilight. I see there was a pause before Bianca offered a half-hearted smile. It is fitting, though. Oh. Thank you. They had no chance to continue before Bianca's vox crackled. Bianca. Mashes called over the vox. Bianca, are you there? This is Bianca, the Hospitaller replied. I am with Terra, and we've managed to sedate Angelique. Oh, good, the Inquisitor replied. The warp storm seems to have only done superficial damage, so I will need you to make sure Angelique is fully secured. And can you send Terra up to the bridge? I would like to have a word with her. What is it, Mashes? Twilight asked, rising to her feet. Is it about the warp storm? Not exactly. We've reached Solemnace. Mashes had seen countless worlds over the course of his life. Hive worlds, choked with refuse from billions of souls. Forge worlds scarred by vast mechanic use facilities. Blasted death worlds where men scraped by in harsh storms and burning rad deserts. Feral worlds teeming with vicious life forms that could tear apart even the mightiest of warriors with little effort. Pasture worlds and feudal worlds, with their gentle rolling hills and quaint villages. Even world falling under the sway of the Tau, abandoned paradise worlds marked with the twisting spires of the Eldar or overrun by greenskins or tyrannids, all molded into alien shapes unthinkable to civilized men. He had seen countless worlds, and yet nothing matched the sheer, unnatural wrongness that was Solemnace. It spun lazily in its orbit, slowly circling a star that by all readings should have collapsed in on itself back when humanity first mastered fire. It was a perfect sphere of dark metal, marked only by thin lines of glowing green hieroglyphs he could barely make out. While it did possess the thin glow of an atmosphere, he saw no clouds, no forests, nothing that would indicate that there was air on the planet, and yet there it was. Its gravity was far too low for a planet of its size, more akin to Terra than the Neptune-sized behemoth that hung before the Sanguinium martyrs, and what satellites it possessed spun in their own orbits rather than adhering to the rules of normal orbits. All the more reason that Mash's hand had not left his bolt pistol since they broke through the warp storm and arrived here. Not that it would do much against the Necrons. "We are approaching Solemnace at speed, my lord," the captain said from behind him. "Orders. Slow to cruising speed, and move all power from the guns," Mashas said, his eyes not leaving the image of the tomb world before him. "The last thing we need is for the Xenos to blast us to scrap before we even have a chance to make our case." "Yes, my lord." The cruiser shuddered as it decelerated, Mash's hand twitching again as he watched the tomb world. Obviously the Necrons spotted his ship when they broke out of the warp, but no ship or signal had risen to counter their approach. Perhaps they were waiting to see if he had come alone, or given the reputation of the Lord of Solemnace, Mashas was being taunted. Mashas. Mashas did not turn as Twilight came up behind him, her boots clanking against the deck. "Is everything all right?" "As much as it can be given the circumstances," he said. "The Empress put you at the head of this mission, so if we are hailed it would be good if you made first connections with our partners." "If you think that's best," Twilight replied. "You talked down a Primarch and bested a Daemon, Twilight," Mashas countered. "Speaking to a Xenos abomination will be simple. You're taking this a lot better than I thought you would. It's about all I can do to keep myself from declaring exterminatus." There was a pause before he sighed. "So many Inquisitors have died trying to take Solemnace. I've been praying that we don't become another casualty." They said nothing more before a warning klaxon rang through the ship. "My lord. We are detecting energy signatures ahead, similar to warp exits. Reverse engines and bring us to a stop, then open comms." He could hear Twilight opening her mouth to raise an objection, but that died as 10 ships flashed into being before them. Each one was easily double the size of the Sanguinium martyrs, great crescent-shaped vessels looming down on the cruiser like a pack of carnivorous beasts cornering a fawn. He could see squadrons of smaller craft swarming beneath the shadows, fighter craft of similar design to the dreadnoughts bearing down on him. Moment of truth. "Empress, protect us all." There was a burst of static followed by a harsh voice, the speaker spitting every syllable as if they were all curses. Given what little he knew of the native language of the Necrons, they probably were. "This is the Sanguinium Martyrs, cruiser of the Ordo Xenos on a diplomatic mission to the Lord of Solemnace. We humble ourselves before your might." Another pause before the same voice spoke, in Gothic this time. "What business does your ilk have with Solemnace? Why have fleas come to trifle with the lords of the Necron tier?" "My lord," Twilight stepped forward. "I am called Terra, personal student of the Empress of Mankind, Lord of the Imperium of Man. I have come to barter and exchange gifts with the ruler of Solemnace, and seek only safe passage that this task may be complete." Mashas said nothing, watching in silence as Twilight took command. The Empress had chose her student well, pony or not. There was another burst of static before a new voice chimed in. "Apologies, my dear," a smooth, metallic voice echoed through the bridge. "My underlings can be so temperamental, even in the best of times." I see." Twilight shifted on her feet, giving a nervous glance towards Mashas. "Don't be intimidated now. Are you the Lord of Solemnace?" "Come now, fair child, Lord of Solemnace is but a title," the voice chuckled. "You may call me Trazyn the Infinite, Archaeovist of the Solemnace Galleries, Keeper of 10,000 Secrets. From what I understand you are called Terra, correct?" She looked to Mashas again. "Yes. Such a quaint name. Fitting for one as well spoken as you are." "No," the voice chuckled before continuing. "Ah, but you are here on business from your Empress. What need have you of pleasantries and japs? What may I offer you, dear Terra?" Twilight squirmed at this. The Necron was flattering her, sure enough, but Mashes knew she took grand formalities poorly. I have a gift from the Empress, Lord Trazyn, she started once she had regained her composure. My orders are to barter it for the unbound flame, if you are willing to treat with us. The unbound flame, a pause. Now that is an interesting choice of a relic, my dear. Your Empress must find it to be of great value, another pause, Mashes chewing his lip in preparation for things to go further south. But I suppose I might be willing to part with it for the right price. Very well, bring your ship into orbit and come down. I would love a chance to show you my collection in case there is more that might catch your fancy. As soon as the voice departed, 5 of the battleships cornering the Sanguinium Martyrs flashed out of view, the others parting to allow the cruiser to pass. Mash's hand remained clamped around the handle of his bolt pistol. If anything, it gave him a fleeting amount of comfort. Are Necrons normally this polite? Twilight asked, looking at Mashes. We're too busy shooting at each other to exchange pleasantries, as is typical of Xenos, Mashes said. This one, though, is known for making a mockery of decorum to disarm his opponents. His collection probably has several dozen beings that weren't so alert to his manipulations trapped inside. Twilight swallowed, clasping her hands together in front of her as she averted her gaze. As satisfying as it was to see that she was getting a healthy fear of the alien in this universe, Mashes did not wish for her to become too nervous. Just be on alert when you're down there, he said, his voice softening. Expect the Necron to double-cross you when you appear to be at your most vulnerable. I have some experience with that, Twilight said, unclasping her hands before continuing. You're not coming. Someone needs to be here in the event you need an extraction, Mashes explained, looking down at himself still dressed in his inquisitorial robes. Also, robes are not good defense against Necron weaponry. I'd rather not delay too much lest our hosts decide looting our dead bodies is more prudent. Oh, a pause before Twilight gave a weak smile. I suppose I'll have the sisters and Mirshen, but your experience in these sorts of things is pretty substantial. I'd be more comfortable if you were there to make sure I didn't overstep things. I know, Mashes nodded. But if you're going to be the leader the Empress wants you to be, you'll need to step forward even if things are not set as you desire. There was a lengthy pause, Twilight wringing her hands again as she looked around the bridge. I know, she said finally. It wouldn't be the first time, really. I guess it's just nerves right now. I should probably get going, then. Twilight turned to leave, Mashes allowing her to pass by before another thought came to mind. Terra, he said, turning slightly so he could meet eyes with her. Be careful down there. I will, Twilight nodded. You've taught me a lot about that, haven't you? And with that she was gone, stepping through the door and down the hall while Mashes turned his attention back to Solemnace before them. He tried to allow some of the tension in his body to ebb, but to little avail as he watched the Necron ships arranging themselves over the planet. Mashes was no stranger to feeling powerless, but why was it digging into him now? Orders, my lord, the ship's captain asked. Keep us in a stable orbit, he replied. And make sure comms, teleportation fields, and our warp drive are ready in the event we have to flee. There's nothing here we can leave to chance. As you command, my lord. There was little conversation as the shuttle made its way down to the surface of Solemnace. The sisters had not said much, keeping off to the side as Ariel's tech thralls prepped Celestia's gift from arrival. Mirshen watched over them all, the Astarte's expression unknowable behind his helmet, though from the way he gripped his spear he too seemed to have some tension behind him. All Twilight could do for now was stand off to the side and brood. Mashes had told her to be careful. That was all well and good when dealing with Tyranids or the like, but this Trazyn had been polite when they had arrived. Thoughts of her and her friends confronting discord crossed her mind, but even he had a certain amount of malice behind his words and actions. Either the Necron really was being polite, or he was greater at hiding his emotions than Celestia on a particularly stressful day. If her fears and Mash's warnings were anything to go by, probably the latter. So engrossed was Twilight in her worry that she almost did not notice Mirshen crossing to her. Miss Terra, he said, his voice muffled by his helmet. If you so desire, we can handle the parley from here. No, it has to be me, Twilight said quickly. This Trazyn, he expects me to be there. I think. I don't know, this is the first big diplomatic mission I've had to do on my own, so I'm kind of nervous right now. Understatement of the year, a small voice that sounded a lot like Rainbow Dash echoed in Twilight's mind, but she shook her head to clear it away. By all accounts you did well in gaining our right to speak with this creature. I have no doubt that you will see the unbound flame return to its rightful owners. A pause, Mir Shen looking down at Twilight. Even if you do not have faith, I and your friends have more than enough. I know, a pause before Twilight quirked a smile at the Forge Father. You don't have to keep yourself separate from the others. You're my friend too, you know. I understand. Mir Shen nodded. As I am an Asteroots, I do find myself outside of most human norms. He paused before resting a hand on Twilight's shoulder. But I am honored that you consider me your friend. Twilight smiled more fully, reaching up and giving Mir Shen's hand a pat. They had no chance to say more before the ship lurched slightly, old metal creaking before coming to a rest. We have arrived. Mugos Ariel's voice droned. The relic has been prepared for delivery. I and my tech thralls will be remaining here in the event you need to return to the ship. The tech thralls backed away from the box, having moved it onto a small dolly for ease of transportation. Naomi and her sisters had taken point, forming a rough semicircle in front of Twilight and the box while Mir Shen moved around behind the gift. Twilight's hand rested on the hilt of her sword, taking a few breaths as the loading door swung open and gave them their first look at Solemnace. Phalanxes of metal skeletons waited for them, assembled so not a single one was out of line. Most were armed with what appeared to be glass tubes filled with green lightning, while others near the front carried double-barreled versions of the same. Still others were equipped with hexagonal shields and short swords, and a small collection carried long staves tipped with wide axe-like blades. Small machines resembling oversized beetles scurried beneath their legs, but the phalanxes remained completely motionless despite the disturbances and the presence of the humans. All save the leader of the phalanxes. He towered over the others, and would have been at eye level with Mir Shen were they to stand face to face. His chest was painted blue save for a golden sigil similar to the shields of his guards. The armor swept upward to give him the semblance of a hood, holding up a cape of black metal scales that made him appear more massive than he probably was. He carried a long stave with a wide blade on top, the circuitry glowing with similar energy to that which rested within the weapons of the lesser Necrons. And as impossible as it was, the metal skeleton seemed to grin as Twilight made her way down the gangplank. "Welcome," he said, sweeping his arms wide towards his army. "Welcome to Solemnace, student of the Empress of Mankind." "Thank you," Twilight replied, stepping up to behind Sister Naomi. "I presume you are Trazyn." "As there would be any other, my dear student," the Necron chuckled, moving to peer over the Sister Superior and down at Twilight. My, you are quite a beauty, aren't you? If we met under different circumstances you would make a fine centerpiece for my collection. Try it, and I will rip your head from your body, Xenos." Naomi snapped, raising her combi flamer towards Trazyn's face. The Necron regarded the Sister Superior for a moment before casually pushing the weapon out of his face. "As I said, different circumstances," Trazyn replied, his eyes flickering as he looked back to Twilight. "You should be proud to have such dedicated guardians, good student. So difficult to come by these days, no? I suppose." Twilight was unsure if Trazyn was being sincere or not, so she decided to err on the edge of caution. "We have a gift for you, that we wish to exchange for the unbound flame." "So you have told me. I am quite eager to see what it is." Trazyn brushed past the sisters, gliding towards the box as Mir Shen stepped forward. "I don't suppose it's you, is it?" "No," the salamander growled, his voice dripping with more malice than Twilight knew he possessed. "You have tried to steal our relics countless times. You will not have the satisfaction of claiming them from me." "I will take that as a no," Trazyn replied, peeking around Mir Shen to spot the box. "Ah, that must be it, then." "Yes." Twilight stepped up at the Necron Lord, ran his hand across the wood. "The Empress of Mankind sends her regards. And I thank her for her generosity." Trazyn fell silent, tracing some of the patterns along the wood. "Oh, I know what this is. It's a Terran puzzle box, no? 25th millennium, carved from paradisia oak, if I am not mistaken." "You," Twilight started, her hands tightening again. "You're familiar with this?" "Yes. Unfortunately, I have several in my collection, all of which I solved centuries ago." Twilight's heart dropped at Trazen's disappointment. Celestia would never send her off with a gift that someone already had, knowingly, at least. "Well, I suppose allowing you to leave unscathed will suffice for the gift." Trazen ran his hand across the box, flipping a few panels and switches on the box. "All I need to do is move these pieces here, and it will dash a pause," the Necron bringing his free hand to his chin. "No? Interesting." He flipped the pieces he moved back to their original position and tried again, turning a few other pieces to no avail. Twilight watched in silence, her tension barely ebbing as she tried to gauge what Trazen's next move was. For several minutes Trazen fussed over the box, slowly circling as he tried to find a means to open the puzzle box. Twilight and the others stepped back to give him more room, Ruth and Rebecca glancing towards the rest of the Necrons in the event they moved to engage. They seemed content to watch their leader inspecting his new prize, but their unblinking gazes offered little comfort. Finally, Trazen spoke again. "I owe you and your Empress an apology, my dear," the Necron said, turning and resting his hand on the box. "This is quite the gift you have presented me. I shall find great joy in deciphering its secrets in due time." He stepped away from the box, Twilight watching as a small scarab ran to a central point on the object. There was a pause before 4 bolts of green electricity whipped around the box, spinning around it before folding back on themselves to leave only empty air. "Some kind of teleportation technology that doesn't use warp energy, interesting. Then you will barter for the unbound flame?" Twilight asked. Of course." Trazen chuckled, sweeping his cape behind him as his phalanxes spread out to give him room. "Oh, I am so glad that I have found someone who is as appreciative of arts and history as I am. Come, let me show you my collection." Trazen strode onward, oblivious to the fact that Twilight and her group had not fallen in step behind him. "Well, at least we're not dead yet," Judith chirped through her vox. "Tara, you should catch up with him before he uses whatever Xenos tech he used to move that box to capture us." "Yes, of course." Twilight nodded, looking back towards Mirshen. "I suppose you're coming with us? Or do you think it best to watch the ship?" "I must be there to recover the unbound flame," the salamander said. "And, perhaps, finally put an end to this creature once and for all." Twilight could do without the violence, but did not say anything more as she started after Trazen, jogging to catch up with the Necron as he continued his walk. "It is a rare time when I get to show visitors my collection as it is meant to be seen," Trazen said, not bothering to turn and face Twilight as she took a position behind him. "Far too often the visitors here try to shoot me. Quite rude, don't you think?" "Why yes." Twilight stammered. "As one that appreciates the finer things of life, it pleases me that there are others that share my sentiments." They approached a large monolith, the structure bedecked with glowing runes and a large gate of green energy. "This is the entrance to the human galleries. Go on in, the portal is quite safe." "How do we know you won't just teleport us all to different places so we are divided?" Naomi said, coming up behind Trazen. "If I had wished to do that you would have noticed by now." "Well, come along, I have so much to show you." Trazen stepped through first, taking Twilight's hand in his own as he entered the portal. Twilight opened her mouth to protest, trying and failing to dig her heels in as the alien robot dragged her through the portal, but her protest died when she came out the other side. The cavernous hall they entered was unlike any museum Twilight had seen before. Rows upon rows of statues and displays filled her vision, all lit up with the same green energy the Necrons seemed fond of. Not just statues, but racks of old swords and guns stacked and perfectly categorized, paintings and tapestries hanging in thin air, even a few life-sized dioramas of great heroes battling against orcs, tyranids, and other creatures. Twilight took a sharp breath, rushing towards the display of a custode standing at attention, the warrior's gaze forever fixed to a point on the horizon. "Wow," she whispered. I've never seen statues with such detail. Only the finest for my collection, Trazyn said, drifting around a display of a Kadian general standing proudly over a slain Chaos Space Marine. This one here I took from the first fall of Kadia. Good thing too, for he'd almost fallen to that silly warlord your people kept worrying about. Really? Twilight crossed back, watching as faint wisps of smoke rose from the statue's cigar. How did you manage to capture this moment, then? And the cigar, it looks so real. What did you use to create the smoke? Oh, a stasis grenade and some creative liberties, nothing too extravagant. Twilight's wonder died instantly as the Necron chuckled. That's really him, then, she stammered, stepping back from the statue as if it were Nightmare Moon reborn. If you are collecting something, why settle for pale imitations when you can have the real thing? Trazyn chuckled again as he continued onward. Ah, but that's not even the best part of my collection. Come. I have the sword that won the Feast of Blades around here somewhere, or was it the 5th? Your Asteroots do like to hold on to their relics for longer than most would find healthy. Twilight whimpered, shying away as she took in the hundreds of similar displays that surrounded her. She wanted to run, to go back through the portal and teleport to her room on the Sanguinium Martyrs and tell Mashes he was right and she was wrong, and then they could get out and never come back here. Terra! Twilight yelped and spun around, making eye contact with Rebecca as she and the others finished crossing through the portal. What happened? Where's the Xenos? She started, working her jaw before letting loose. He froze people and turned them into statues. That is what makes this Xenos so despicable, Mir Shen said, striding up to the statue of the Kadian. He takes warriors and heroes in their moments of triumph or greatest need and stores them here, for no greater purpose than he can. Many times he has tried to take the weapons and armor I wear from those who previously held the title of Forge Father, and there are perhaps countless numbers he has killed or slighted in his efforts to claim them or their relics. Twilight choked, staggering back as Rebecca and Judith reached out to her. Then, we have to stop him, Twilight said, get the Empress to come and set everyone free. Oh, there must be hundreds of people in here, she tried taking a few deep breaths to calm herself, but to no avail. Finally, Judith spoke. Terra, I know this is horrifying, she said. But remember why we're here. We need to recover the relic first, then we can take vengeance on this alien, is that okay? Twilight choked, but deep down she knew the sister was right. She gave a feeble nod, straightening herself up as the sisters stepped back to give her some room. Did I just advocate for restraint in regards to dealing with Xenos? I think so, Ruth replied. Even for you, that's unnatural. What's unnatural? Ruth yelped and spun, aiming her bolter at Trazyn's head as the Necron Lord drifted out of the shadows. I sense that this is going to be a recurring event for our tour, is it? Maybe you shouldn't sneak up on us. Twilight snapped, stepping forward to be between Trazyn and her friends. What kind of host are you that you try to scare your guests like that? If you take some offense in my mannerisms, I do apologize for any discomfort I may have caused. Hollow words considering Trazyn had living people trapped in his collection, but Twilight did not want to directly address that, at least until they got the unbound flame. Then rebuking could begin in earnest. Now then, let's find the unbound flame. Trazyn took up his stave and strode back into the gloom, Twilight and her companions following slowly behind. As you can see, I have many different relics from across your history. For being such a primitive species, you have generated so many fascinating items and figures during your time among the stars. Of course, Twilight said, eyeing a display of a squad of space marines battling against some brightly colored Eldar. Collecting them has been a bit hazardous at times, Trazyn continued. The unbound flame, for instance, I found in the hold of some Rakgol pirates many centuries ago. Fascinating if brutish creatures, the Rakgol, they can be simple-minded, but they do have an innate skill for improvisation, much like humans now that I think of it. A pause before he laughed. They smell worse, though. Ah, here's something I think you will appreciate. Twilight said nothing as Trazyn stepped aside, revealing a glass box that could easily be the ground floor of a large building. Inside were assembled dozens of Necrons, some marching in their phalanxes while others were modeled bursting from the ground to attack. Sisters, Naomi breathed, Twilight following her vision to spot small groups of black-clad women arranged in battle against the aliens. My latest display, the Massacre of Sanctuary 101. Trazyn said, his voice dripping with pride. Sadly, I could not find originals, so I had to improvise. Thankfully, the Zandryak dynasty were more than willing to lend some of their subjects to the display. They shot my surrogate a few times, but that is only a minor issue. You are a monster, Xenos. Naomi growled, turning towards the Necron. You captured sisters for your sick collection. I have been called worse, Trazyn said, turning away with a dismissive wave. It's still a work in progress, though, but perhaps you might like to see it in its completion someday. I'd rather not, Twilight muttered, her hand falling to her sword as they continued further. Okay, definitely need to come back and save everyone. Ah, a pity. I'd like to have your opinions on the matter. Trazyn quickened his pace. Twilight tried keeping her eyes on the Trazyn, but kept finding her eyes drifting towards rows upon rows of trapped soldiers and lost relics. After all that she had seen, all she had done, she could not just leave them like this. Even discord did not trap ponies in stone. My Lord Trazyn, she started. Yes, my dear. Trazyn replied, stopping and turning to face the group. Your collection, Twilight said, gesturing to the nearby display of a freshly severed head in a jar. Would you ever consider, I don't know, letting go some of your collection? This, Trazyn stepped up to Twilight, looming over her until he all but blocked out the light above her. Are you suggesting that you wish to steal from my collection? The Necron growled. I am wounded, child, wounded, that someone like you would think to betray my hospitality for their own gain. No. No, nothing like that. Twilight said quickly, backing up to put some space between her and Trazyn. I mean, have you ever considered setting some of your prizes free? By your own volition. Set them free? Trazyn asked, stepping back and raising his free hand to his chin. You mean, be the hero and let your champions back upon the world, to battle for the fate of your species? Yes, that's exactly what I mean. Twilight said, allowing a small smile. There was another pause as Trazyn considered Twilight's words, drumming his fingers against his chin. Finally, he laughed. Oh, my dear child, you are so amusing with your silly ideas, he chuckled, oblivious as Twilight's smile vanished. Me, letting go of my collection. Oh, that is funny. You humans and your amusing ideas. Oh, but I am losing track of our purpose. Look ahead, and you will see the unbound flame. A bit closer than I remember, but then I've been busy, Twilight gasped as the Necron stepped up to the display. It appeared to be a coffin, large enough that she and the sisters could all fit comfortably inside if asked, held about a foot off the ground in some kind of anti-gravity field. The main piece was a dark green color, the seams inlaid with gold and small pieces of obsidian. The cover was decorated with a carving of a dragon's skull over a roaring flame, both framed by two ribbons decorated with a script Twilight could not understand. Promethean, maybe? Even in the low light of the tomb world it seemed to sparkle, shimmering as if it were made of a true flame. Twilight stepped up, running her hand across the coffin before drawing back. It's warm, she said. Why is it so warm? It is blessed by Fukin's forge, Mir Shen said, stepping up next to Twilight. By Terra, it is the most beautiful thing I have ever seen. It is one of my favorites, when I venture into this part of my collection, Trazyn said from behind them. Well, this has turned out better than I hoped. My curiosity has returned again, I should wander these halls more often. Hush, Xenos, Mir Shen said, reaching up to touch the unbound flame for himself. Twilight had stepped back to allow the Forge Father some room, watching in silence as he traced every line carved into the metal of the unbound flame. He whispered something, again in a language Twilight did not know, but speaking any more felt improper. It would have been best to leave him to his rapture. But so caught up was Twilight in the moment, that she almost missed Judith's warning. Terra, look out! Twilight spun, a psychic shield already forming as a fist-sized silver ball arched through the air towards her. The shield was quick, catching the ball and deflecting it off to one side, Twilight watching as it bounced away before exploding into a flurry of green lightning. 2 display racks of weapons were caught by the lightning, flickering for several moments before winking out of existence, only shadows in the dark to mark they were ever there. The shield spread out, expanding to cover the sisters and the unbound flame as all the humans centered on Twilight. This left a slightly embarrassed-looking Trazyn on his own, the Necron quickly tucking his hand back under his cloak. "Well, that didn't work as I had hoped." "What didn't work?" Twilight cried, using her free hand to draw her sword. "What were you trying to do to my friends?" "I admit, I should have voiced such concerns before acting, but one of the joys of collecting is in the action rather than the hassle," Trazyn said, in a tone more befitting rarity, discussing thread counts than a robotic overlord. "As we were talking, I thought to myself, the unbound flame is such a unique artifact, I would loathe to trade it for something so commonplace. But you were impressed by the puzzle box. You said it yourself." "Oh, indeed, I was." Trazyn straightened himself up before continuing. "That and your ship would probably have been enough to cover the trade, but then you presented me with these fine specimens, 5 Sisters of Battle and the Forge Father of the Salamanders with all his relics. I could almost finish Massacre of Sanctuary 101, and maybe start on that Polyphemus 4 reenactment I'd been thinking about. All noble displays, if I do say so myself." No, they aren't," Twilight strengthened her shield. "It's sick, and I will not have you threaten my friends like that. They would be well taken care of, trust me." Trazyn stepped forward, poking the shield with his free hand. My, this is an interesting shield you're projecting. Don't come any closer, or I'll dash." "Please, student, don't make idle threats around me." Trazyn drew his hand back under his cloak, withdrawing a few more spheres like the one he had tried to use earlier. "Now, here is my offer, your friends for the unbound flame. You will be able to leave this planet and its orbit, return to whatever world you came from first, and we can all go in peace. Is that fair, to trade the lives of your friends for the fate of your empire?" "No," Twilight glared, feeling as more power built up inside her. "Nothing, no empire or relic, is worth the life of my friends. Now Miss Terra, please try to think." Trazyn never finished, for Twilight's magic had built up before snapping forward. A solid beam of purple light shot forward, engulfing the Necron's torso as the shrieking sound of tearing metal filled the air. The bolt dissipated, showing that all that remained were 2 wobbly metal legs, Twilight giving a small gasp as the legs tipped over and fell with a clatter. "You," Veronica stammered. "You killed it. He will return," Mirshen said, drawing the spear of Fukin before stabbing it into the ground just in front of the unbound flame. "Necrons are rarely destroyed for good, and Trazyn is one of the most crafty. Come, we must free the unbound flame before he recovers." "What do we need to do?" Twilight asked, dropping her shield and hurrying to the Forge Father. "The Necrons have a stasis field around the unbound flame. I can cut the circuits, but you will need to hold off any energy or defense mechanisms that might fight against me." "How?" "I know nothing about electronics of this intricacy. But the Necrons are blind to the warp, your psychic powers should baffle their defenses well enough." "Hurry." Twilight nodded, crouching down next to Mirshen and reaching out with her magic towards the cuts he had made. She could feel something pressing against her, the very metal stitching itself back together even beneath the intense heat from Mirshen's spear. Twilight increased her strength, pressing back against the metal as the Forge Father cut, and soon the process of self-repair within the circuit had begun to slow. Mirshen worked his way around the unbound flame, Twilight expanding her magic to keep up with the asteroids. Soon the field around the coffin began to flicker, the coffin wobbling in the air as they continued their work. The repair cycle within the planet picked up, a few scarabs scurrying out to try and help, but Twilight's magic was enough to flick them away without much difficulty. Finally something gave, the field winking out and the unbound flame hitting the ground with a dull thud. "Perfect," Mirshen said, setting his spear aside for a moment. "Now, to get it back to the surface." "I can teleport us out," Twilight offered. "No, Miss Terra. The distance is too far, and the Necrons no doubt have devices set up to block your teleportation. But there must be an entrance by which we may dash. Terra. We've got contact. Twilight stood up and turned, raising her shield in front of the sisters just as a phalanx of Necrons materialized in front of them, led by a very frustrated-looking Trazyn. Now that was completely uncalled for, my dear. Trazyn said. I understand your concern, but there is no need to resort to violence. You're trying to kidnap my friends. Twilight snapped. That's a perfectly good reason to protect them. And that is admirable, if a bit misplaced, but I do wish that we can maintain our relationship past this minor disagreement. He stepped forward again, this time flanked by two of the larger Necrons armed with swords and shields. Lower your shield and turn over your companions, and we can work out a mutually beneficial exchange. No, never. Twilight said, strengthening her shield once more. My friends are not expendable. No human is in my eyes. You might just see us as object, curiosities, but humanity is far greater than anything you might capture. Yes, I've heard all this before, Trazyn said, his hand clenching in frustration. Do not make this more difficult than it needs to be. Get out of our way and let us leave with the original exchange, and it won't be. There was a lengthy pause, the Necron Lord regarding Twilight for several moments. He was about to speak when a warning klaxon echoed through the hall, a droning sound that sent a chill down Twilight's back. Oh, what is it now? Trazyn grumbled, turning away from Twilight and staring out into the black. Oh, I see. Well, I suppose that might be of interest. He turned back to Twilight. I'm sorry, my dear, but I must be going. Other matters have come up, but I'm sure everything will be resolved. So, you'll let us leave? Twilight asked. On the contrary, he turned back to his phalanx. Kill them all, but do try to leave their relics intact. I'd rather not make this day a total loss. As Trazyn teleported off to parts unknown, Twilight braced as the other Necrons stepped forward and brought their guns to bear. Green lightning raced forward, exploding across Twilight's shield as she poured more power into her defense. The sisters stepped up in front of her, Rebecca and Veronica opening fire with their bolters while Naomi's combi flamer unleashed a torrent of burning promethium. Twilight stepped back to allow the sisters more room, keeping her magic steady as she looked for a means to escape. Mirshen, do you see an exit? She asked as another bolt of Necron firepower crashed against her shield. No, but one cannot be too far off, the Forge Father said. I cannot carry the unbound flame myself. Do you know much telekinesis? Of course, Twilight replied. But that might cause the shield to fail. We'll need to be quick about the transfer of power before I can carry that out. We shall protect you, Terra. Ruth called. As you have been our shield, so let us be yours. Empress tits, die already you stupid Xenos. Judith. Blasphemy. Twilight fought back her blush as she tried to shift her energy, reaching towards the unbound flame while also keeping the shield focused. Some bolts of Necron firepower slipped through the barrier, but none were even close to hitting the sisters, Mirshen, or herself. She had almost reached a stable energy level when her vox crackled. Era. Mash's voice called. Terra, what's going on down there? Trazyn betrayed us and tried to capture Mirshen and the sisters. Twilight called back. Please don't say you warned me, because I get it, you warned me and I wasn't careful enough. The fact that you're still somewhat calm means things haven't spiraled completely out of control. Mash's replied. What's your extraction plan? Mirshen told me not to teleport, so I'm not, she said, watching as Ruth fired a burst of shells into the chest of an advancing Necron, only for the creature's arms to knit back on as if nothing had happened. Can you find somewhere where we can get into open air and then maybe we can get past whatever wards Trazyn has? Well, that's going to be difficult, Mashas said. A chaos battle fleet just broke out of the warp and is heading straight for Solemnace. I can get to you, but you're still going to have to fight your way out, if we're not all dead from the crossfire.